Welcome everyone to Surrey Muse's 118th gathering. This is our 28th virtual gathering since COVID. I'm Mariam Zohra and I'm your host tonight. It's my pleasure to present to you our features. Welcome. Featured author tonight is Matt Nagin. He's an author, poet, and comedian who has published 4 books, acted in numerous film and TV projects, and performed stand-up in 7 countries. He published his first humor book, Do Not Feed the Clowns, in 2019. Earlier, his poem, If We Were Doomed, won the 2018 Spirit First Editor's Choice Award. He also appeared on the Amazon series Hunters in a scene with Al Pacino. Matt's fiction has been published in Across the Margin, The Binnacle, and Void magazines. One of his stories will be anthologized this summer in Rabbit Hole, Weird Stories Volume 5. Matt performed his one-man show, Woolly Mammoth Panic Attack, at the Edinburgh Comedy Festival, while his short film, Inside Job, won several awards at festivals. Matt worked as a talent and show coordinator for the Gotham Comedy Foundation, a charitable organization that brings comedians into hospitals and senior centers. Amazing, Matt, and we are so pleased to have you feature as our author tonight.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Nagin. I'm a writer and comedian living in Alabama, from New York originally. And today I'm going to read from my humor collection called Do Not Feed the Clown. Don't feed the hungry clown. I've written a few other books, poetry books. Here are a few of them you can check out. A little humor pamphlet. Basically, this is a collection of 34 short pieces on various topics. And I'm going to start with a piece called New Apps. And just read a little excerpts from it. The following apps are in early stages of development. Shame Center, a competitor of the iPhone's Game Center, developed by a Jewish mother. SnapRat, a Snapchat competitor that scolds the brats who use it. Lincoln. Lincoln is like LinkedIn, only it connects you to a theater where you will be shot in the head. Groupedia, a cross between Groupon and Expedia. No one has figured out exactly what that means. A hero. Apps that will be brought to market 1,000 years from now. Casa enables you to return home after a long period of time travel. Call the T-Mobile support line if you're stuck in a time bubble. iDictator creates new phones or iSlaves subservient to the original phone. Face ID assassinations, hands-free genocides, and app-based chemical war. The end of humanity available for a small additional fee. There's more to the piece, but that gives you a little idea. So I'll give you an excerpt from another one that I think, as writers or creatives, we can all deal with. We all deal with rejection, which can be tough to take on the self-esteem. You know, if it wasn't for all the rejection I get, my therapist wouldn't have a villa in Florence. So these were various letters that great writers might have obtained, rejection letters, had they written in the current milieu. The Catcher in the Rye. Dear J.D. Salinger, we very much appreciated reading your nonfiction book about a down-on-his-luck baseball player lost on a cornfield. Even though this narrative isn't right for us, since we exclusively publish Bildungsromans featuring cynical boarding school dropouts, we thank you for the opportunity to consider your work. Sincerely, John B. Riley, assistant to the assistant editor, Random House. Ulysses. Dear Mr. Joyce, are you on IG? How many Twitter followers do you have? Would you be willing to fake your own death to boost sales? Well, this book isn't right for us. We need someone to write a teen vampire saga in the style of Twilight. Help us corner the YA market and we'll consider turning Ulysses into a made-for-TV movie. As for Ulysses' prospects as a standalone novel, again, our deepest regrets, but it has far too much merit to ever seriously consider it. Peter Brook, the vile human being literary agency. Lady Chatterley's Lover. Dear Mr. D.H. Lawrence, we regret to inform you that we will be unable to consider Lady Chatterley's Lover for publication without a drastic rewrite. It is our belief that this narrative needs more sensational, romantic encounters, ideally revolving around a paddle, a pair of handcuffs, and a ball gag. While the quality of your writing is undeniable, the sex scenes between Lady Chatterley and the gamekeeper seem far too prudish by today's standards, nor are they sufficiently frequent. We suggest you reread the 50 Shades of Grey trilogy and cut and paste where appropriate. Sincerely, James Bismuthi, the Hot Nipple Press. Waiting for Godot. Dear Mr. Beckett, dull characters, zero plot, lousy dialogue. Please reread Aristotle. Sincerely, Robert McKee, screenwriting coach / producer. The New Testament. Dear 12 Apostles, while we appreciate your very dramatic renderings of the story of Jesus H. Christ, we regret to inform you that we can only publish one of your testimonies. We suggest all of you go home, revise your Holy Scriptures, and resend them to us with a $45 reading fee and a statement about what you will do with the $12.57 in royalties in the unlikely event you actually get published. Sincerely, Jim Search, the Lakewood Church Bible Group. A Tale of Two Cities. Dear Mr. Dickens, we'll publish this, but only if you make it a tale about one city, and that city has to be Cleveland. Kindly yours, the editors. Ancient Hieroglyphs. Dear Egyptian slaves, we are sorry to report that we cannot publish your excellent hieroglyphs. Market conditions are tough, and we cannot make sense of these ornate symbols, even with the Rosetta Stone. But we encourage you to keep engraving your ancient psychobabble into everything from a tomb to a sphinx in the hope that they'll one day end up in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Best, Pharaoh. So there's a trend in New York now, even though we have, there's excellent New York pizza, to offer Detroit pizza, these square-style slices. So that there's many establishments like that. So I took off on that, and after an introduction, gave other ideas for pizzas that may be coming down the pike. Okay, Flint Pizza. In Flint, thanks to the abysmal drinking water, thousands of lead poisoning, and there is an outbreak of Legionnaire's disease. Fortunately now, after waiting in a meandrous line, you can suffer like an impoverished resident of a dilapidated Michigan city confronting a hard public health emergency. Yes, each slice is loaded with a heavy metal neurotoxicity that imbues it with a gritty, no-holds-barred flavor. Beloved toppings for a small additional fee, including asbestos, petrochemicals, and DDT. Please note, burial services not included. Aleppo barbecue sauce. Our homemade recipe is the perfect mix of mutated chicken parts, sorbitol, tripotassium phosphate, and sarin gas. This final chemical agent, or organophosphorus compound, has tons of lethal zestiness, a devastating chemical war pungency. Spread it all over your steak or employ it as a dipping sauce for chicken fingers. Hurry! Any minute now, the U.S. will conduct airstrikes overhead. Please note, we have no affiliation with Iraqi Grey Poupon, a condensed form of mustard gas that killed all those poor, helpless Kurds. Green New Deal ice cream. Although this looks like ordinary ice cream, it is 500 times more expensive. Eco-friendly, GMO-free, non-toxic, and of course, utterly impractical. This ice cream isn't going to save the planet so much as annoy the fuck out of it. All profits from this Green New Deal ice cream go to purchasing Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez a bigger high-rise apartment and or ensuring she has sufficient funds for her upcoming lobotomy. What is more, Leonardo DiCaprio eats this ice cream after he sleeps with a handful of gorgeous 19-year-old models, each of whom he recycles far more often than he does his Save the Planet talking points. Please note, Al Gore wanted to make a documentary about this ice cream, but sadly he fell asleep, just as audiences did watching An Inconvenient Truth. So, Stanley Kubrick is my favorite director. He's just a very powerful filmmaker of such great films as The Shining, A Clockwork Orange, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Full Metal Jacket, etc. So, because he's become such a legend and such a cult figure, I envisioned a man who wanted to profit off of his fame, since that seems to be a trend, by publishing an account of various people who had brief interactions with him, like his colon hydrotherapist, okay, or his exterminator who handled his termite problem. So each of these little accounts are an excerpt from this section. And I'll read you one section, right, which is, again, an encounter with Stanley Kubrick. Frederick, the part-time dentist. I was Stanley's dentist for one improbable visit. This is in 1968, shortly after his regular practitioner mishandled a root canal. Stanley needed a cavity drilled fast before returning to the set of 2001: A Space Odyssey. I started off with a routine cleaning. Lots of plaque, yellowing bicuspids, some minor bleeding of the gums. I recommended a periodontist. He disliked this advice, but I pressed him and also offered detailed instructions on brushing his teeth in a more efficacious fashion. I've read 6 books on brushing, 12 on flossing, he replied. Maybe, I parried back, but you don't seem to be pressing the brush firmly enough against the gums. Busy perfecting a new front screen projection technique for a film about an astronaut that transcends the space-time continuum, he snapped. Excuses. The script is being co-written by Arthur C. Clarke, the preeminent science fiction writer of our time. Your gingivitis is still horrible. Eventually, he agreed that in spite of his impressive filmography, he needed to brush in a more calculated fashion. I proceeded to drill the cavity that had been giving him such agony. As I did so, I recited a series of chicken-cross-the-road jokes, none of which he found remotely amusing. True, he may have been preoccupied with the Dawn of Man sequence, which earlier in his visit he wouldn't shut up about. Still, he could have at least displayed some minimal appreciation for my lifelong passion. Hurt that Kubrick was not amused in the slightest, I drilled the cavity a bit more fiercely than necessary. I saw his fist clench into a ball and noticed the beads of sweat form on his quivering forehead. I had him. I was Crassus and he's Spartacus up on the cross. Ha! Not so ingenious now, are we, Stanley? Spit and rinse, I commanded. He tried, missing the mark, to witness the great aesthete spitting wildly, the drool sliding down his dingy beard, turned my whole body into a sponge of delight. What Jeeves, he asked. You've been drilling this cavity for 2 infernal hours. Patience, Stanley. Patience. Patience, you just drilled half off my face, you goddamn jackal! What an arrogant wanker. He required up to 140 takes for his actors to deliver a scene that reaches his lofty standards, but he expects perfection from his dental practitioner right out of the gate? The hypocrisy. Put the tubes back in his mouth and continued as before. I wasn't drilling near his cavity, just burrowing a hole in the side of his tooth for the sadistic pleasure it engendered. As I drilled, I moved on to a series of Borscht Belt jokes revolving around a fly in a man's soup. He squirmed and twisted, writhing even, the joke seemingly as excruciating as the obscene drilling. After about the 400 stellar punchline, he screamed with a deafening intensity and knocked all my instruments to the ground. He then cursed me and every last one of my descendants and left without paying. Do I feel guilty about torturing such a visionary artist? Not at all. The egocentric miscreant deserved it. So that was that one. It's pretty intense. But like I said, I do really love Kubrick. He's got to be one of my favorites of all time. So, as I said, this book covers topics far-ranging, okay? So, this one gets into the fashion trends and the kind of fashion articles you might read in Vogue or in some sort of style magazine, okay? Sometimes I feel the writers are so into the themes that they're not able to step back and see the larger picture and see what they're actually doing. I mean, fashion can get out of control. I think a book like Glamorama by Bret Easton Ellis showed that very well. Anyway, without getting off my soapbox there, that whole mindset is what got me to write this parody of sorts, and I'll read a lot of it, not the whole thing, but it's called Suicide is In Again. By the way, suicide's sort of always in, I mean, let's be real, but that's the title. Suicide is in again. Utilitarian tropes are over. Camouflage, outdoorsy gorp-corp, protective garments heavy on the nylon are being replaced by a more savage impulse, a kind of punk rock, nihilist aesthetic ushered in by Kate Spade's suicide via Kate Spade red-branded scarf. While authorities have yet to reveal whether she hung herself with her New York sunsilk bandana scarf or her New York flamingo scarf, the days when the above can be paired with a jingly dress from Paco Rabanne or an electric-hued animal print from Saint Laurent have abruptly come to an end. Throwing the black dresses at the Golden Globes in support of Me Too, Anthony Bourdain hanging himself, and the general political tumult that has revitalized interest in berets, fedoras, and beanies, and you have a recipe for a fall 2018 season destined to be mortifying in all the best ways. Here's what we can expect. Vera Wang Cutter Collection. Rigor Mortis. That's what comes to mind when watching Vera Wang's most irreverent collection to date. It's not just skirts made from sheer parachute silk and vests with detachable peplums. It's not just free-flowing gowns with diamond-shaped cutouts. It's large serrated knives embedded into a tiara, goat blood droplets, literally spilling off the free-flowing chiffon dresses, and a kind of grueling neon color scheme that is best described as psychedelic chainsaw. All the models were dead before they reached the end of the runway. Bullet holes at Bauman. Simple sequins don't cut it anymore, at least where it counts, the wrist. While there's still a tendency to combine high-shine dresses with a palace of auditory delights, the whir and twirl, the click-clack and rat-tat-tat-tat, even the whoosh are all at Bauman entirely the product of guns being fired off. Models in chain-link dresses, gush charred flesh, and cough blood in synchronicity with an ever-so-gentle swaying of bullet-laden hips. While some look like target practice at a firing range, others have a stray bullet hole leaking out the neck, a regal death motif, particularly since the gory wound was most often obscured by a milk frock. Julian Dos Sena may have experimented experimented with gunshot wounds in his New War collection, and Thomas Brown certainly alluded to it when he went mad for chainmail. Still, only Bauman has managed to skillfully blend a light and airy sensibility with the vibe of horrific mass shooting ardently endorsed by the NRA. Been about the baklava dinner, Alexander Wang, that certainly had end ski masks. This was hardly preparation for the Gucci reimagining of the guillotine. Sharp edges, towering heights, a blade that slices entirely through the neck so that the head can be picked up and displayed to the crowd, all help make this latest offering seem radically innovative as Richard Quinn's Dayglow burqa. Luxurious yet utilitarian, menacing while never quite colliginous, the Gucci guillotine is frankly turning heads. Those yet to be severed, we mean. While Coco Chanel's crucifixion collection and Dolce & Gabbana's drowning paradigms tried to steal some of the oxygen in the room, an element in short supply given the context, there was only one designer who had his models dressed like headless horsemen while tossing beautiful skulls out of the crowd. Bolstering this apocalyptic vision were storming of the Bastille dresses and reign of terror cleavage. Could there be any other kind? That skillfully blended Robespierre-like gore, including eyeballs for buttons, with Oscar de la Renta's understated sophistication. It was also inspiring that you can perhaps understand how all my girlfriends are desperate to be beheaded this fall, but only while wearing Gucci. So that was that one, and it's clearly a parody of the fashion industry and of the excesses there. So I guess to finish, I can just tell you, because I don't have much time left, I'm a writer, a comedian, and I perform down in the South here as well as in New York. So check me out. I'm all over the place, and I have some new books coming out soon. So I really appreciate this opportunity to be on Surrey Muse, and love connecting with other artists and creatives, and I'm just grateful to have had this time.
And now we'll feature poet Josephine Laurel. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Josephine is a poet, photographer, and writer who has published 2 collections of her work, a Calgary Herald bestseller, the Coetchon series, and Unity. For her first collection of poetry, Josephine received the Norma Epstein Prize for Creative Writing while in her 3rd year at University College, University of Toronto. Her poem, The Tea Set, was shortlisted for the 2019 Room Poetry Prize. Josephine is a member of the League of Canadian Poets and the Writers Guild of Alberta, among others. Her words have been read on stage and in global Zoom rooms, put to music, danced, integrated into visual art, and published in 11 countries and 4 languages. She has taught classes in creative writing for the Alexandra Writers Center Society and the Wine Country Writers Festival. Josephine writes in English, French, and Italian. Welcome, Josephine. So pleased to have you.
Hello, my name is Josephine Laurel, and it's an honor for me to be a featured poet with the Surrey Muse Art Society. I've prepared a set of poems today as a tribute to my father, and I have to say this is my take 2 because my father just passed away, and the first take that I did was very morose, and I don't want to remember my father in a negative way, or I want my grief to overshadow my life or my memories. I will start by saying that I live currently in the land of the Haudenosaunee people. My home is in Calgary, which is the traditional ancestral lands inhabited and traversed by a number of different groups, including the Kainai, Nakota, Tsutsina, Piikani, and Siksika people. And I would like to acknowledge and thank these different groups for bringing language and poetry to the land. There are many rooms in my father's house, and I would like to explore that through poetry. The first poem I have is called Rhetorical Questions. I asked the universe, now? It said no. Wait, why not now? Why does the earth continue to turn despite the sinking of the polar caps? Why do we only see the one face of the moon? Is the other ashamed by our travesty? Why do planets revolve around the sun? Why doesn't one break free to start its own trajectory? I would. Why are there nebulae, or is that a nebulous question? Why does mankind, regardless of country and continent of origin, create tales to explain the relative positions of the sun? Would I have a different zodiac if I were born in the southern hemisphere? And why do the hands of their clocks not run counter the way their water circles the drain? If I am who I am because of the hour and place of my birth, why aren't there more like me? Are there more like me? And why do questions seem more important in the dark? Why are we not winter oxygen starved because of lack of leaves? Why can we not breathe in water? Why have we no wings? Is language a blessing or a curse? Why are these bodies so ill-prepared for life in the elements? No fur to keep us warm, no leather on our feet, and why are there no new mythologies? For my second poem, I would like to share Trinacria. Trinacria is the symbol for Sicily, Sicilia, which is my parents' origin. And I find it interesting that besides having a patron saint, Rosalia, Sicily also has a patron goddess because it was initially colonized by the Greeks, and it's Medusa. And instead of snakes in her hair, the Trinacria, the symbol for Medusa in Sicily, is Medusa's head surrounded by sheaths of wheat, because Sicily was the breadbasket of Europe, the Mediterranean Europe, at least at one time. So, Trinacria, this island runs like magma through my arteries. Acqua di mare, liquid blue, Mar Tirreno, Mar Ionio, Mediterraneo, sea in the middle of the land. Three angular shores, Medusa's head at the core, three legs bent at the knee, sheets of wheat, three. Scirocco blows Saharan sand across wooded scapes. Dancing la mazurka under the moon, la tarantella, eyes fall to the rhythmic weight of la ninna nanna. Lullaby sung to children, lo sole, the sun rising into blood orange Sicilian sky. Beyond their words, a poem dedicated to my parents. The smell of sawdust on his clothes and in his hair and in his pores, the roughness of his hands and the breadth of his sun-tanned back, the darkness of his eyes, under lashes thick, she pale and fair, hazel eyes, auburn hair, he profound. His proclamations meant to be absolute, she shrill and reigning over us nonetheless. The bathroom he built in the basement of our 3-story house, where so many rooms were just for company, just for show. He, my father, a deep pool, she, a rushing torrent, a thunderstorm, and she would hurl words that hurt the air around our ears. So many things unsaid, stories we never learned until we were grown. Her mother dying young, leaving 5 children behind. Her father dead or gone. Rumors hushed. Her brother taking her in to work. She boiling water carried in from village fountain to wash the diapers of his infant child. The letters that my father sent, taken away, hidden by her brother's wife behind the mirror of the dresser. How she became betrothed to another, believing my father had forgotten. How my father's father and my father's brother went to the house to ask why she wasn't writing back. Those were different times. When I asked why their love was not officially declared before my father left to mine the coal heart of Belgium, I was told they were too young. He had no diamond for her finger, no gold, and the promise was to keep them until he could come to claim her as his bride. All of this I never knew, for I was but a child, but some evenings he would sit upon a backless stool in the basement of our house, smelling of planed pine, hands rough with work, fatigue heavy on broad shoulders, and she would kneel before him, lift his feet one by one from the basin in which they soaked, wash them, towel them dry, and he would look upon her softly, and I could feel, but still not comprehend, the ties that went beyond their words. The next poem is about my grandfather, and there's a few Sicilian words. So nonno means grandfather, and ta and so is a way to, it's an appellation of respect, or uncle and aunt, but said in a respectful way. Votive red. I rode my bicycle once to visit the cemetery, when you weren't really there, no. A box in the wall, dull plaque, smile set, your face square, your grey hair, candle and red glass votive. When you died, we laid you to rest under open skies at Mount Pleasant, the same place as La Salida e lo Solamono. She, puckered and toothless, he filling the days after her passing, carving duck-head handles for canes. Sanucha was there too, but in a different section, for she had taken her life. And babies, so many babies. My sisters and I wandered, read aloud names and dates on grave markers, time gnawing away at letters and numbers, while Papa, on his knees, trimmed the grass around your plaque with scissors brought from home. In the back, straddled chief and Mama rubbed the metal brass so bright. Papa would pour the brackish water from the vase, add fresh flowers, lit the votive red. We visited you every Sunday, Nonno, and I wonder now, had I lain on sun-warm grass, would I have felt the beating of your heart in your chest? Heard your laughter bright, seen again the wolves and doves that you shadowed onto walls, the orange zigzag teeth you carved. Watch you play again that game, tapping, tabletop, 2 fingers, 4, I forget now the point of that game. I don't visit you that often anymore, since moving to this jagged place where prairies crawl up to the knees of mountains, a place you'll never visit. And to tell you the truth, I never could really picture you there, in that box in the wall. They moved you to the mausoleum. Plastic flowers sad as the face of the Madonna. Back in Sicily, cemeteries are like that, not enough space for the dead. I think of you this Sunday morning, your olive coral flesh, your hands white-fingered, breath warm as your smile, secure in your arms, a child, as you pointed out, buds swelling in the tree, lifted leaves to show me tomatoes greening on the vine, held me up to La Vigna, the grapes growing in our own backyard, offered me tendrils, tangy sweet, told me of Sicilia. Your laughter soft as the rough stubble of your cheek upon mine. I think of you under blue skies, Mama. Grass, eternal green, and light a candle to remember vote of red. I mentioned Scirocco in my poem about Sicily. So Scirocco is a wind that rises up over the Sahara and lifts sand from the desert and takes that sand across the Mediterranean. And when it arrives in Sicily, it falls. And it falls red. And when it rains, you can imagine. It looks like that. Scirocco, my sleep disturbed by Scirocco last night. Red sand blowing across the face of my dreams. My father was declining in health, and I wrote this poem when I came back to visit him a week after my son died. And it's prompted by a quote by Robert Frost, "To sit quietly." Ah, such treason to sit quietly with death, to not shake his cold grip from my arm, to know he waits expectant in the hall, my father's ragged exhalation tainted by his breath, my father's face grown gaunt, teeth missing from his skull, fingers spectral, and sometimes his gaze dimmed, as if he sees us only from afar, a figment of himself, wavering between this realm and next, like summer bedsheets flapping in the wind. Photographs bring heaves and tears as he recalls the young man he once was. He moans in his sleep, and he talks in his dreams. Emaciated legs no longer hold his withered frame. He winces when I tend his wounds, but brightens when he says my name. And I think death must mean no great harm, for 90 is a long time on this earth, and I would no longer resent the tender touch of that which I no longer dread. But oh, what anguish to sit quietly with death and not shake his cold grip from my arm. My father passed not even a week after I wrote that. He did pass peacefully, and the following poem, I have to give a trigger warning because it's raw and it's my grief. I belonged to certain poetry circles and had gone into a circle, and we had 10 minutes to write, and the assignment was to write autobiography based in the present. So we had to think of a time of day. And my time was just after lunch, which isn't really a time, but so someone else got my time. They had to write about 1:30 in the afternoon, and I received somebody else's time, which was 9:30, and it was actually 9:30 when I started writing it. So again, my apologies for the heaviness of the poem. I'm just going to give a preamble as well. In the first stanza, I talk of coyotes. So as I mentioned earlier, I live in the land close up to the Rocky Mountains and on the southern edge of the city, close to Fish Creek Park, which is a wonderful park. And sometimes at night I hear the coyotes call. There isn't a time, but it's just as the sun is setting and the sky goes dark, they call to each other quite joyously. And I've sometimes been tempted, animal part of me, I guess, has been tempted to go out in search of coyotes and others. 9:30. It is 9:30. My body says sleep. My mind says rest. My heart steps out into the night, leaving the front door open in search of the call of coyotes. If I had a slingshot and 7 smooth stones, 5 smooth stones, even 3, I would pluck the street lights from the sky one by one, so that all that would be left would be the cold moon and me. I no longer care about the stars. Their stories no longer matter. The chatter of man, the warmth of fire in fields, none of it. There was a place in my father's garden, a bower of figs, and when I stood in it, sunlight filtered through various spots as if our sky held multiple suns. That was the day after my father died. It is 9:34. I looked at the clock and noticed 124 hours had slipped by after his death. He passed at 00:18. Time has become an accordion with only sad strains stretching out and tumbling past. It has been 6 days since he passed, 30 hours since his cold body was jack-lifted into the maw, sealed with putty and trowel and drill. My father had a trowel just like that. He too used tools. I had gone down to the garage into one of those balsa wood baskets that once held summer tomatoes, tucked one of my dad's tools into my tote for the funeral home in case I needed to feel him close. A wrench. And I tucked a few nails into the pocket of his vest suit, some loose change. He always had nails in his pockets when he worked, a carpenter, like the Father of Christ. Nails and coins sometimes fell out of his pockets when he lay down to nap, and when I was tasked with vacuuming the couch cushions, I would find them. Quarters and pennies and nickels and dimes, and always a pencil behind his ear and a smile on his face as brilliant as the Sicilian sky. It is now 9:38. I felt his spirit surround me while his lungs still expanded and emptied, and his pacemakered heart beat still, his hands warm. That was before his forehead felt like he'd just been taken out of deep freeze. And I brought my lips to his brow. In the casket, I cupped his head with both hands. He didn't like to be called. Commódiame, he instructed me. Cover me, please. He asked so little of me at the end. His spirit around me just past 4 that afternoon, my kids coming in from their day-long travel, me waiting at the entrance of the hospital, breathing real air for the first time in days. I felt him, and I felt his peace. And if I sit quiet for a moment, I can still feel it. But will it fade like the taste of salt in the sea, the aroma of coffee? A hug that feels like it could go on forever if only we could stand still enough. I do not know. It is 9:42. Thank you. Again, my name is Josephine Laurel. I grew up in Toronto, the land of the Haudenosaunee, and I live in Calgary, the land of Piikani, Tsuut'ina, Nakota, Kainai, and Siksika peoples. And it is an honor to be invited to read as part of the Surrey Muse Art Society. My very best to you and yours.
And to continue, our featured performer is Enrico Renz. Enrico Renz is a Burnaby singer-songwriter who plays guitar, bass, keyboards, and drums. A founding member of Red Herring, the Vancouver art rock band, he enjoys backing up singers, spoken word artists, and improvisational dancers on guitar. Enrico has released a CD titled Skytrain as part of Secret Messengers, and he co-hosts a weekly songwriters open mic in New Westminster. About his relationship to music, he says, I see myself more as a song gardener than a song builder. The work lies in tending the song. Enrico's country of origin is Switzerland, with Italian and Swiss German as his mother languages. Thank you, Enrico. I'm so looking forward to your set tonight.
Hello, Surrey Muse. Got a handful of songs for you here today. I hope you'll be able to find something that resonates with you in this collection. The Hummingbird Song. My baby lives in a tree house far away from the street, in the middle of a fragrant meadow, in the late September heat, where vagabonds dare to linger and maybe hum a tune. And the hummingbird is the noisiest thing in this golden afternoon. When I call upon my baby, I bring her broken twigs. She sets each one in water and smiles upon the sprigs that will bloom in her roomy welcome someday soon. And the hummingbird is the noisiest thing in this golden afternoon. My baby's an angel, beholden to this earth. She beckons us all, be merry, bring laughter, love, and mirth to all and one another someday soon. And the hummingbird is the noisiest thing in this golden afternoon. Hans. Hans flew a Messerschmitt, went down over Leningrad. His wife bore a boy that looked like him. Grew up on the Soviet side, died for liberation. His wife bore a boy that looked like him. Made it to America, a child of the 60s. Laid down his life in Vietnam. His wife was a flower child, sang like an angel. She bore a boy that looked like him. He's now in the middle of a midlife crisis, been troubled for a very long time. There's a face in the mirror, but he asks himself, is it mine? Hans flew a Messerschmitt, went down over Leningrad. His wife bore a boy that looked like him. Grew up on the Soviet side, died for liberation. His wife bore a boy that looked like him. Made it to America, a child of the 60s. Laid down his life in Vietnam. His wife was a flower child, sang like an angel. She bore a boy that looked like him. This next song is dedicated to all my fellow artists. Shoes. I left my shoes in the foyer and entered the house. It was clean and expensive and smart. The floors were hardwood, the lighting thought out, and the walls were covered in art. From the view of the city below, you could see just how much a man can achieve. Though they treated me graciously, I felt small in that house, and I desperately wanted to leave. My host was a friend from a long ways back, when we both were unbearably young. And here was the future we'd argued about, and oh, how the look of it stung. He'd always adhered to the common sense way, and made all the moves it prescribed, while I had to dream this impossible dream, and I'm still not quite sure how it died. Now I'm back in the foyer, look at my shoes, scuffed up and thin in the sole. I bend down to tie them, just about cry as my toe pokes out of a hole. I'm there on one knee as my friend and his wife awkwardly look down. Come on, shoes, it's time to get back to the dreamy side of town. Henry. Henry was a maniac. He killed his 7 wives. Is this the kind of maniac we need to run our lives? Oh no, child, you got it wrong. That story isn't true. The kings of England all were men of truest, bluest blue. Alexander was a thug. He pillaged half the earth. Is this the kind of thug we need to tell us what we're worth? Oh no, child, you got it wrong. That tale is falsely told. The heroes of antiquity were all as good as gold. The tongues that rule the world today are forked as any snakes. Are these the kinds of tongues we need to wag for our sakes? Oh no, child, you got it wrong. The things you're apt to think, the tongues that wag on our behalf are short and thick, and pink. That song can also be called The Colors We Fly Over You. Like a flash flood in May, it swept me away. Just like they say love can do. What a turbulent ride over the side, over you. Like a snowfall in June or a spooky blue moon. It's unsettling to find love too true. Overnight, what was right, I just swept out of sight over you. And how my heart, once so cool, once so glacially blue, now so simply defies its own rule, just melting over you. Like a flash flood in May, it swept me away. Just like they say love can do. Into the stream, over the falls, over you. it's time. The clock says it's time. We all get in line, waving goodbye from the railing. Does anyone know where we're sailing? Is this the brochure? How can we be certain? The language it's in needs explaining. And what will we do when it's raining? Meticulous smiles, the perfect disguise for messages shaped to mislead us. What voices convince us they'd free us? They're raising the flag, we stand at attention. These tears in our eyes must have meaning. Please tell me which way we're now leaning. There's no land in sight, the stars in the night witness the fate we're creating, while icebergs are silently waiting. The clock says it's time. We all get in line, waving goodbye from the railing.
Now, our open mic opener is Angus Pratt. Angus Pratt is a poet, essayist, health activist, and a transplanted Scot who is grateful to be living on the unceded territory of the Tawasin, Siamimu, Katsi, and Kwantlen peoples. At 13, Angus won a Saskatchewan Wildlife Federation contest with an essay on pond life. During time living in northern Saskatchewan, the Wild Rice Writers Group supported his venture into poetry. After his diagnosis with lung cancer and male breast cancer, he resumed writing. Now he crafts his poetry, medical narratives, and a blog documenting his cancer journey. His digital stories have been showcased several times at the Wellspring Digital Story Festival based in Calgary. Welcome, Angus Pratt.
Howdy, I'm Angus Pratt, and before I get too far into my work, I want to thank Surrey Muse for the invitation to present my poetry and my essays. Much of my recent writing has been in the realm of medical narrative, which is just a big fancy way of saying telling stories about wellness and illness. Part of what I talk about is me coming to terms with my own illness, male breast cancer, yeah, men can lose their boobs, and lung cancer. I hope to share with you today some of that journey. I also believe that we can deal with some of the challenges and difficult things that we face through creativity. So before I plunge into those complex issues, I want to read you a poem that, for me, captures that challenge. Discovery. Finding your way through a poem can be a pain-filled experience, stumbling over words that skin your knees, falling in holes that twist ankles, and leave you hobbling, chasing after illusions and allusions. Words that just won't play well with other words, like raucous children on a playground jungle gym. Then the rhythm settles down and the pulse of sentences breathes life into dead thoughts, and words float gracefully together, pirouetting, happily dancing a pas de deux, sounding like sonorous waves in the gentle sigh of wind in the pines, wildness and wilderness complete. So how does simplifying complexity work? The largest international organization studying lung cancer, ISLAC as we like to call it, asked me to write a patient perspective on a particular lung cancer treatment involving complex tests. Here's an excerpt from the article that I wrote. Patient perspective, the promise of personalized medicine. For the first time in many years, patients with late-stage lung cancer are experiencing a major improvement in treatment options. This comes with promise as well as challenges. At diagnosis, patients are often still given a discouraging, poor prognosis based on historical medical statistics. They're also told of recent innovations in testing and treatment, but can find it hard to separate the hope from the hype. Each patient's case is different. Most require a unique approach. Unlike Henry Ford's sentiment, any customer can have a car painted any color that he wants, so long as it is black, one size does not fit all in cancer treatment. However, personalized treatment can be onerous for medical systems that depend on standardization, such as insurance companies. Rapid treatment evolution, medical jargon, and economic resources are all hurdles for the patient. I often have the opportunity to make presentations and talk with large organizations about my experience with cancer and lung cancer in particular. This is a poem that really, I think, became my first expression of how I feel sometimes as I deal with these large organizations. Cancer Inc. is a title taken from a reference by Audre Lorde in cancer journals to the profit-driven machinery driving not-for-profit cancer organizations, pharmaceutical companies, and government regulators. Cancer Inc. Noctambulent stalker, peddler of false comfort and fake hope, denying the terror and death of cancer, the toast of boardrooms around the globe, prowess with profit and unpronounceable drugs that twist the tongue, tire and rack the body, leave financial ruin, fatigue, and side effects in their wake. But without the spine to face those with the disease, hiding in boardrooms, behind clinical trials, you slink around, cross your T's and dot your I's, you climb bureaucratic ladders of greed and profit in the shadow of others, researchers in white lab coats, crusaders in pink bras. Happiness of bog orchid, sweet Mary Jane will not cure or even calm, nor will turmeric or any peachy vegan concoction. You would not survive the broadside of devastating diagnosis, 5-year arbitrary definition of cure. Know that your power will not wax strong, that even with a mnemonic brand name, you will be forgotten, like the Apple penny table test for dementia. For patience will triumph with tenacity and resilience, hope refusing to die, like Dickinson's thing with feathers keeping us warm, while never asking for a thing, living while dying. A big part of my writing has been a blog documenting my journey. A recent entry chronicled a road trip from Surrey to Calgary via Kelowna and back. Up at dawn to a chilly morning made me wish I'd purchased 2 bundles of wood. But hot coffee, oatmeal, and layers of clothing chased off the cold. Breaking camp kept me warm until I was back on the road. My first challenge of the morning was finding good cell reception for a Zoom call at 10 a.m. Cancer advocacy research waits for no one on vacation. I found a wonderful little spot in a nature reserve on the outskirts of Princeton. The views and the birds, my first meadowlark in years, were the envy of my co-researchers. Then I ran into data problems that turned out to be a change in my cell phone plans. Since I had no music and only intermittent radio, I resorted to my downloaded book, the cancer classic, Emperor of All Maladies. It gave me an appreciation for the long history and the mystery of cancer. A Twitter acquaintance told me of teaching a course based on the book. She brought various oncologists to talk about the diseases that the book mentioned. The capstone class was bringing the author himself in to address the class. Inspiring, I can only imagine. Ironic listening as I contemplated the joy and freedom of the open road. Moving to a later part of the trip. My oldest boy, Sandy, had flown back from Quebec City to Edmonton the night before, so I texted asking if he was open to me rerouting myself through Edmonton on my way back to be able to see him. I didn't hear back right away, so I had a nap and went for a walk with my little sister to see the neighborhood fishing pond. I got a text that read, "On my way," while we were walking. Typical cryptic Pratt. I wasn't sure what it meant. When we walked in the door and there were an extra pair of sandals in the doorway, tears welled up. He had driven down to spend time with the old man. Little sister, unbeknownst to me, had invited him to join us, and while 3 hours of driving might give me pause, for him it was a common trip. We had a fabulous barbecue meal that the two of them collaborated on, and talked and talked and talked. So good to catch up with both of them. We laughed over the camping trip that I'd taken with him and Evan after my diagnosis, but before my treatment started. We both thought that that might be the last of those at the time, but it wasn't the end, and we wondered when the next one might be. These are the conversations that cancer patients have. Thanks for listening and traveling with me today as I navigate this wild journey that we call life.